Pretty much every discussion about fighting games nowadays seems to revolve around the genre changing to attract new players, often by sacrificing things that make it mechanically unique from other genres. It's always about how other genres have teammates to blame. Other genres have simplistic controls. But this recent obsession with copying the success of other genres is causing people to lose focus on what makes fighting games so special in the first place. It is an unavoidable fact that making drastic changes to a product with the sole purpose of giving it broad appeal means you have to sacrifice something that makes it really special, all under the grim fallacy that a game being different means it's niche and therefore not as good. I've pretty much never heard roguelike fans, bullet hell fans, or tactical RPG fans talk about their favorite genres the same way we talk about ours. But if a game like Dead Cells can sell more than 10 million copies, I think these discussions are clearly missing something crucial. Ironically, I think the best argument for this doesn't even come from a fighting game at all, but rather the South Korean third-person shooter game, Guns the Duel. An old title famous for its ridiculously technical gameplay. The countless animation cancels allowed players to intricately blend movement, offense, and defense to create some of the most fluid and deep combat I've ever seen. It's got shit like reload half-stepping, double flash-stepping, quadruple butterflies. But despite Guns being very difficult when it comes to execution, the sheer freedom and oceanic depth that came with this technical gameplay allowed it to cultivate a very dedicated and loyal fanbase. The devs soon tried to capitalize on its success with a sequel, Guns 2. But simplified much of the gameplay in order to make it accessible.
Unfortunately, Myatt decided to go the generic shooter route and make the game as bland as possible.
And in the end, what players got was a generic bland shooter that was just like every other bland shooter on the market. While the first game was mechanically complex but breathtakingly fun, the sequel was just painfully forgettable. Ironically, it was simplifying the game in order to attract a broad audience that fractured the existing fanbase and killed the entire franchise, simply because there was nothing special about Guns 2. So I think there's one obvious lesson we can take from this. Instead of asking ourselves how we can change fighting games to be like other genres in order to have immediate broad appeal, we should instead focus on playing to the genre's strengths and letting that popularity rise in a natural and organic way. Because I'd rather spend years cultivating a tight-knit community like roguelikes than fall off faster than battle royales. A lot of the debate about changing the genre revolves around the removal of so-called arbitrary motion inputs, as well as the addition of a block button in place of holding back, two things perfected by the Super Smash Bros. Series.
No other genre uses a quarter circle forward or a dragon punch motion for basic actions, and because of this, it's simply less efficient for overall gaming enjoyment to learn Street Fighter over Call of Duty.
And while many veterans have already pointed out the role that these things play when it comes to balance, I don't even think balance is the main reason why they should stay. They simply contribute to a responsive and satisfying game feel. Contrary to what your average scrub quotes victim would argue, motion inputs weren't just invented as an arbitrary gatekeeping mechanic. Every move in Ryu's arsenal was specifically crafted to give off a tactical feel that matched the action being performed. Whenever Ryu performs a Hadoken, he bends his knees and pushes his arms forward to release the fireball. And when he does a Shoryuken, he inches forward a bit, leans down to chamber his arm, and rises upward with a deadly uppercut. Motion inputs allow developers to tailor a sort of mechanical personality that gives every character their own distinct identity, like Guile's charged sonic booms, Zangief's butter-churning pile driver, and Fei Long's chicken wing. Some argue that the need to learn a whole new set of controls every time you switch characters is frustrating, but when motions are homogenized or even taken out entirely, characters start to lose their epic personal flavor. At their core, fighting games are about player expression and interaction through character matchups. So it's cool to see these unique mechanical personalities clash like the fireball wars between Ryu and Guile. I'd argue that back to block contributes even more so to the game feel than motion inputs, hence why fans of the genre pretty much always prefer it to a dedicated block button. When you start holding back, you are forced to give up a bit of space, and inversely, walking forward to close the distance forces you to leave yourself open to attack. This constant back and forth is a lot more responsive and engaging than just holding the right trigger and kind of fucking standing there. I'd even argue that parries and third strike being tied to a forward input is the main reason why it feels so damn good to pull off in a match. It's just fascinating how fluidly movement, offense, and defense are intertwined together. Sound familiar? It makes the core fighting experience very immersive as the game's character becomes a physical extension of the person playing them. The same way that Guns players feel when they do a quadruple butterfly reload half step, that's exactly how I feel after doing a backdash cancel map a punch with Slayer in Guilty Gear Xrd. It's mechanically complex, but whenever I use it in a match, I genuinely feel like I did that move. and that response makes it all the more satisfying. Whereas Arc System Works' recent fetish for one-button specials and block buttons leave these products having the game feel of toothy blowjobs. Yes, a lot of traditions in fighting games are foreign concepts to people who have never interacted with the genre. The same way that learning how to aim and move around in a 3D environment was very difficult for my mom, who grew up exclusively playing fighting games. And adjusting to permadeath was frustrating for me while playing my first roguelike. But I can honestly say that I would never have gotten into roguelikes if it weren't for that unique permadeath tradition that frustrated me at first. And my mom had a lot of fun learning how to aim and shoot in Battlefront. If someone isn't interested in these mechanics, they're probably not going to play the genres anyway, and that's okay! You don't have to if you don't want to, but I'm just happy that these games continue with their traditions, because some people, like myself, masochistically enjoy them. So I don't understand why fighting games should be any different. Recently, there's been a trend of so-called simplification, where demanding tech and advanced mechanics are removed because that knowledge might be frightening for casuals. Like how Guilty Gear Strive made a clear effort to disincentivize instant blocking and heavily gimping the Gatling combo system. Some people argue that this is to prevent a high barrier of entry, which allows more newcomers to join the series.
Casuals also don't want to learn this. Do you get the point? Like, of course I don't care about it. I know how to deal with this. I could probably answer this shit with my eyes closed. But this move is still a fucking barrier of entry.
But that's not the barrier to entry. That's literally the fucking skill ceiling. And lowering the ceiling doesn't prevent a high barrier of entry. It just lowers the barrier of me leaving because of how fucking bored I am. Fighting games already have a really low barrier of entry. Press funny triangle button and do silly punch. If a casual player feels intimidated by doing an instant overhead Yozansen, they simply don't have to use it. The entire point of player expression is to use the character's toolkit in your own personal way. So gutting a cool mechanic that a lot of people enjoy just because some others don't feel like using them is baffling at best. And in my opinion, as someone who is pretty fucking bad at fighting games, it's better to explore the intricacies of a freeform combat system, express my personality in every distinct matchup, and pull off some sick bullshit every once in a while, than it is to win consistently in something that I find painfully boring with little room to grow after like a day or two. It doesn't matter how many times you shout the words barrier to entry, I'm just not gonna find long-term enjoyment in solving a 2x2 Rubik's Cube over and over again. Despite the genre's infamy for how unapproachable these games are, there are dozens of online resources that tell you everything you need to know about anything, like Dustloop for Arxis games, Dream Cancel for KOF games, or Mizumi for the most obscure underground titles no one's ever fucking heard of. The tight-knit aspect of the fighting game community allows even the most niche of circles to share their esoteric knowledge amongst each other. You have an immeasurable amount of information at your fingertips, and there are countless people willing to help you learn. So at the end of the day, the only barrier between you playing a fighting game and having a good time is your own mentality. We've been seeing a drastic shift in the way fighting games are developed in order to get as broad of an appeal as possible. But this obsession with altering our traditions is not healthy for the genre. The mythical casual player is a flaky audience that travels from one hot new thing to the next at lightning quick pace. They'll play Among Us for 1 or 2 months, and then migrate to Multiverses for a month or two, and then so on and so on. Appealing to these players only benefits the company's immediate day one sales and profits, meaning it's really good for the president of Capcom, but it's not necessarily good for the long-term health of the genre, and we need to stop conflating the two. Of course, I'm not saying we should never grow the audience for fighting games, but it needs to be done in a healthy and organic way. The FGC is unique in the fact that its circles feel like families, whereas scenes in mainstream titles like Overwatch are mostly corporate and detached. Not many other competitive scenes allow Joe Somebody to just waltz into one of the biggest events in all of esports and drown 0-2 in pools, but have fun and make lifelong friends in the process. So if you want your favorite fighting game to have a higher player count, start by joining some discords and making friends. Invite some of your real-life friends into these circles. Go to community events or sponsor tournaments in your own city. I promise, the moment you and one of your friends load up Multi-Blood, that funny Steam chart number just magically goes up by 2. If people spent even half as much time trying new games and joining these niche families as they do complaining about low Steam chart numbers on Reddit, these scenes would have 10 times more people in them. Fighting games are different, but that's exactly why I love them. And if fighting games were like any other genre, I would have never fallen in love with them in the first place. So please, just let fighting games be fighting games.